Okay, chapter 20. After Easter, I went to confession every Saturday, and on Sunday morning I took communion. But I was not satisfied. The God I so eagerly sought was not there, and the understanding I thought to gain was not there. The bad blood of spring filled with us with strange yearnings and tumult, and the boys from Los Hados split off from the boys from town, and there were gang fights. Since I was not from across the tracks or from town, I was caught in the middle. It's all part of growing up, Anthony, Miss Violet told me one afternoon after school when I stayed to help her. Growing up is not easy sometimes, I said. She smiled. I will come to see you next year when school begins. I told her. That would be nice, she said, and touched my head. What will you do this summer? I wanted to tell her that I was searching for something, but sometimes I didn't know what it was I sought. I would see the golden cart, but I couldn't tell her about that. Play, I answered. Fish, take care of my animals, and go to El Puerto to learn about farming from my uncles. Do you want to become a farmer? Hello. Dump it and stack it, please.
No.
Well, why are you sitting there mad? You're just wasting time. What are you up there for? I'm reading. You see me doing something. I'm staying busy. What are you doing? No, Alaman was pouting, like maybe because you don't understand, maybe. But you'll get it. Do you want to become a farmer? She asked. It was difficult to leave her, but outside I would hear the clamor of the departing kids. I had to get home. I don't know, I said. It's part of the thing I must learn about myself. There's so many dreams to be fulfilled. But ULTIMA says a man's destiny must unfold itself like a flower, with only the sun and the earth and water making it blossom and no one else meddling in it. She must be a wise woman, Miss Violet said. I looked at her and saw that she was tired, and somehow she seemed older. Perhaps we were all older. Yes, I said. Goodbye. Goodbye, she smiled and waved after me. I ran very hard so that by the time I was at the bridge, I was exhausted. My lungs were bursting with clean air and my heart was pounding. Still, I had the nerve to call out a challenge to the kid. Ras! I shouted. He was walking with Ida. I had never seen the vitamin kid walking before, but there he was, just starting across the bridge, side by side with Ida. I raced by him and called the challenge again. I put all I had into that race. I ran as hard as I could, but the kid never passed me. I reached the end of the bridge and turned to look back. Through watery eyes, I saw the kid and Ida still walking side by side across the bridge. Andrew said that someday I would beat the kid across, I remember. There was no sweetness to the victory. Instead, I felt that something good had ended. In a way, I felt relieved school was over. I had more time to spend with ULTIMA, and in her company, I found a great deal of solace and peace. This was more than I had been able to find at church or with the kids at school. The llano had come alive with spring, and it was comforting to walk in the hills and see the new bird take root and come alive green. But even in the new season and in the hills, there were ominous signs. We found tracks near the junipers that surrounded the house. I asked ULTIMA about them, and she laughed and said it was someone out hunting rabbits, but I saw how she studied the footprints carefully and then took a dry juniper branch and erased the prints in the sand. At night, I heard the owl crying in the warning. I heard the owl crying in warning, not the soft rhythmic song we were so used to, but cries of alarm. It is the Norio, I said. Want me to help you pick it up, Ella?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's V40.
Oh. Put it up here? Here. So you can sit on the first step.
The first
Sugar. Bah, do not bother your mind about that wolf, she laughed. But I had heard the grown-ups rumor that the Norio's second daughter was dying and she would not last the summer, and I remembered his threat. Yes. Oh, yeah. You okay? You like hearing me read?
Yeah.
And then there were the rumors about the evil things happening to Agua Negra Ranch. A curse had been placed on one of the families of the Agua Negra. And because the man knew my father and about ULTIMA's powers, he came seeking help. I'm sorry, Shug. ¿Cómo estás, Teles? My father greeted the thin, weather-beaten man with abrazo. Ella, what were you doing? You were stretching out? I, Gabriel Mares, a gray, emaciated face, smile weakly. It does my heart good to see an old compadre, an old vaquero. They came arm in arm into the house where the man called Teles greeted my mother and ULTIMA. ¿Cómo estás, Teles? The formalities did not last long. We all knew the man had come to seek ULTIMA's help. My father would gladly give his help to any of his old compadres. It only remained to be seen if my mother would allow ULTIMA to go help. My mother had been very afraid for Ultima since the night the Norio and his mob came, and she had not allowed Ultima to help anyone since. People are ungrateful, she said. They seek her help, and after La Grande has risked her life to help them, they brand her a witch. Nonsense. We have no sense for that kind of people. But now we listened intently while the man told of the horror that had enveloped his life. I swear before God Almighty, the lad's voice cracked with a tremble of fear in it, that there are things that have happened to my family that are directed by El Diablo himself. Ave Madre Purissima, my mother exclaimed and crossed her forehead. The pots and pans, the dishes lift into the air and crash against the walls. We cannot eat. The skillet full of hot grease badly burned one of my children. Just yesterday morning I reached for the coffee pot, and it jumped and spilled the scalding coffee on me. He rolled up his sleeves and showed us the blistered pink flesh of the burn on his forearm. Delez, my father said calmly. The imagination, Delez laughed sardonically. This is not imagine, he pointed again in the arm. It was not an accident, he says, and I had not been drinking. Perhaps it is a bad joke, someone who has a grudge against you, my father, the skeptic questioned. Gabriel, the people of Alva are good people, you know that. Who would carry out a joke this far? And who could make stones rain from the skies? Stones from the skies, my mother gasped. See, day and night, without reason, the stones fall, pelt the house. Why? And how is this done? I'm at my wit's end. It is the devil's work, Teles moaned. Courage, my father said, and reached across and placed his hand on Teles' shoulder. There was a curse like that at El Puerto when I was a little girl, my mother nodded. The dishes would move, the statues of saints themselves were found in the pigeons in the outhouse, and stones would fall like rain on the house. See, Teles nodded in agreement. He knew if my mother believed, then he could get Ultima's help. The curse was lifted when the priest blessed the house with holy water. She did not finish. I mujer, Teles groaned. Do you think my good wife did not think of that? The priest from Ron came and blessed the entire house. It did not help. Now he will not come anymore. It says no evil man can withstand the blessing by the holy water, so must be making up stories. Stories. He nodded his head and laughed bitterly. Such stories. We cannot eat, we cannot sleep. My children are like walking zombies. The evil presence moves from like ghosts, and the priests say we make up stories. It is too much. He cupped his head in his hands and cried. So again, the power of the priest has failed, I thought. Why can't the power of God work against the evils that beset the family of Teles? Why is it allowed to continue? What can I do, my father asked, trying to console the poor man. Come with me and see with your very eyes the things I speak about. Someone must believe, Teles exclaimed, taking some faith in my father's offer. I will go, my father nodded. Gracias a Dios, Teles stood and embraced my father. I left immediately, and my father and I returned until late that night. The lights of the truck came bouncing up the goat path, and I ran to meet him. But he did not greet me when he stepped down from the truck, and in fact, he did not seem to see me. He walked mechanically into the house, his eyes wide and staring straight ahead. He looked very tired. Gabriel, my mother said, but he did not answer. He sat in his chair and looked ahead as if peering into a dream. It was not until he took a long drink of the hot coffee Ultima put in his hand that he spoke. At first I did not believe that, as he whispered. I'm not a believer in spirits, good or bad, but... And he turned and looked at it as if he were coming back to reality, his eyes bright and watery. But I saw the things that Les spoke about. I still cannot believe it. His chin sank to his chest. Ave Maria Purissima, my mother cried, and she turned and went to the sala to pray. Meantime, we waited in the kitchen. What is that is happening out there at the ranch? My father asked. He did not look at Ultima, but it was obvious he was seeking some understanding from her. The curse had been laid, she said simply. Like on my Uncle Lucas asked, I was already wondering if she would take me to help this time. No, she said, addressing my father. This curse was not laid on a person. This curse was put on a bulto, a ghost. It is a bulto that haunts the house. I don't understand, my father said. He looked up at her searchingly. A long time ago, she began. The Llano of Agua Negra was the land of Comanche Indians. Then the Comancheros came from the Mexican with his flocks. Many years ago, 3 Comanche Indians raided the flocks of one man. His man was the grandfather of Teles. Comanche Indians raided the flocks of one man, and this man was grandfather. Teles gathered the other Mexicans around him, and they hanged the 3 Indians. They left the bodies strung on a tree. They did not bury them according to their custom. Consequently, 3 souls were left to wander on their ranch. The Brujas who laid the curse knew this, so instead of placing the curse on a member of the family and taking the chance of getting caught, they simply awakened the ghosts of the 3 Indians and forced them to do the wrong. The 3 tortured spirits are not to blame, they are manipulated by Brujas. It is unbelievable, my father said. Yes, Ultima agreed. Can they be stopped? My father asked. Of course, Ultima smiled. All evil can be stopped. All that moment, my mother returned from praying to the Virgin. Teles is your friend, she said to my father. Of course, my father answered. We grew up on the Llano together. We all count each other as brothers, and he needs help, she said, tracing the very simple steps for us to hear. Simple steps for us to hear. There is no one deserving of help at this moment, my father said. Well then, we must help in any way we can, she said with finality. She started to turn to Ultima, but my father motioned her to be still. He got up and went to Ultima. Will you help this poor family? Will you help my friends? He asked. You know the rules that guide the interference with any man's destiny, Ultima said. I know, my father said. I have tried to lead my own life, and I have given other men room and respect to live theirs, but I feel I must do this for my friends, so let the bad consequences in your chain of destiny fall on my head. We will leave tomorrow at sunup, Ultima said. I was allowed to go, and so early next morning we got in my father's truck and headed westward. We traveled halfway to La Pasturas and then left the paved road and turned southward on a dirt road of the Llano. The Llano was beautiful in the early morning, beautiful before the summer of the August sun burned it dry. The mesquite bushes were green, and even the dagger yucca was stately as it pushed up the green stem and blossomed with the white bellflowers. Jackrabbits stemmed that blossom white with the white bellflowers. Jackrabbits bolted from shady thickets at the approach of the truck and bounded away in the rolling hills spotted with dark juniper trees. You okay, hello? The sun grew very white and warm in the clear azure sky. It was hard to believe that in this wide beauty there roamed 3 souls trapped to the devil. We hadn't left home in the gray of dawn, and we had all been quiet, but now the lovely expanse of the Llano filled our hearts and forgot for a while the strange foreboding job ahead of us. Oh, there's no freedom like the freedom of the Llano, my father said, and breathed in the fresh, clean air. There's no beauty like this earth, Ultima said. They looked at each other and smiled, and I realized that from these two people I had learned to love the magical beauty of the wide, free earth. From my mother I had learned that man is of the earth, that his clay feet are part of the ground that nourishes him, that it is his inextricable mixture that gives his measure of safety and security. Because man plants in the earth, he believes in the miracle of birth, he provides a home for his family, and he builds a church to preserve his faith in the soul that is bound to his flesh, his clay. From my father and Ultima, I had learned that the greater immortality is in the freedom of man, and freedom is the best nourished by the noble expanse of land and air and pure white sky. I dread to think of a time when I could not walk upon the Llano, feel like this eagle that floats on its skies, free, immortal, limitless. There is power here, a power that can fill a man with satisfaction, my father said, and there is faith here, Ultima added. A faith in the reason for nature being evolving and growing. There's also the dark, mystical past, I thought, the past of the people who lived here and left their traces in the magic that crops out today. Enveloping our thoughts, we bounced down the sandy road that at times was more than a cow path. I was lost in the immensity of land and sky, but my father knew where to go. At the foot of a hill ahead of us crouched the trouble home with the leads. It was a simple adobe ranch house, squatting low to the good earth. Its rusted tin roof shielding it from the hot sun. To the side of the house were the corrals. That is his place, my father announced. He drove the truck near the corral and stopped. The leads came running. Gracias a Dios que venites, he cried. He believed in Ultima's power, and he knew it was his last source of help. He took Ultima's hand and kissed it. Then he led us excitedly into the house. A frail, thin woman and the children cringed against the wall when we entered. It is all right, Teles said soothingly. La Grande has come to help us. Only then did the woman, whose eyes were burning with fever, come forth and greet Ultima. Grande, she said simply and kissed her hand. Dorotea Teles, Ultima greeted the woman. These are bad times, Teles' wife whimpered. I'm sorry, but I can't offer you nothing to eat or drink. Her voice broke and she went to the table, sat, bowed her head on the rough wooden planks and cried. It has been like this. Teles threw up in his arms in exasperation, and the evil thing came. As he spoke, a strange thing happened. A cloud passed overhead and darkened the house. Teles locked up and cried, It's here. Benditos sean los dulces nombres. His wife moaned. She crossed herself and fell to her knees. A few moments ago, the sky had been clear. Now in the gloom, we saw each other as dark as burtos. My father started for the door, but Teles leaped in his way and shouted, No, do not go. The evil was out there. Then the pounding began. The darkness had already terrified me, but now the strange pounding noise on the roof made me seek Ultima's hand. She stood quietly, listening to the devil's bombardment that held us with such terror that we could not move. The fear of the deafening, evil noise held us prisoners. The children cringed around their mother, but they did not cry. They seemed accustomed to the devil's beating on the roof. Jesus Maria y Jose, my father cried out, and he crossed his forehead. Ay, Teles groaned, is the devil dancing on my roof? His body twisted to the crescendo of the fearful drum beat, but almost as quickly as it had begun, the noise stopped, and the dark cloud moved away. My father ran to the door, and we followed. It was incredible. We stepped out into the perfectly quiet day we had known earlier. The llano was so quiet I could hear the drone of the grasshoppers and crickets in the grass. The rocks, my father muttered. They weren't here when we came. He pointed at the mountain-sized stones that lay around the house. That is what had pounded on the roof, but where had they come from? We looked up. There was not a cloud in the sky. Incredible, my father said and shook his head. The cloud darkened only the house, and the stones fell only on the roof. As he spoke, the two boys who had been inside with their mother came outside. Without a word, they began picking up the rocks and carrying them to the nearby corral where was already a pile of rocks. We stacked the devil's work in the corral, Teles said. This is the third time the rocks have fallen. But from where, my father, and how? Teles only shrugged. You have searched around the house into the hills, Teles nodded. My God, my father shivered. It is the work of El Diablo, I tell you, Teles murmured. Ultima, who had stood quietly by us, answered. It is the work of man, she said. But let us not waste time while the spirits grow stronger. Grabia wanting to erect a platform here. She pointed to the ground and marked 4 spots. Make those here. Use some of those cedar posts in the corral. Make it this high. She held her hand above her head. Place many juniper branches on the platform. Cut many branches because we may have to burn it a long time. Have Antonio cut them. He understands the power on the tree. And she turned and herded the family back into the house. After that, we did not see her for a long time. Have Antonio cut them. He understands the power in the tree. My father found an axe in the tool shed and gave it to me. I went to the hills and began cutting juniper branches where possible. I took dead, dry branches because Ultima had said we would be burning them. But when I had to cut into a live tree, I first talked to the tree and asked it for its medicine, as Ultima had instructed me to do with every living plant. I dragged the branches to where my father worked on the platform. He dug 4 holes and placed the cedar post. And then notice, he said, it is not square but long as it could hold the coffin. With wire, he securely tied some rafters across the top of the post. Then we put the juniper branch roof on the platform. When we were done, we rested and looked at the altar that we had erected. The day was very long. We had not brought food, and so the only thing we had was water from the well, which tasted brackish. That is why they call these the branches of the Agua Negra, my father explained. I wonder if the water which flowed beneath the earth connected the waters beneath our own town, the waters of the golden carp. Strange that there are no animals around the ranch, my father said. The animal sense is bad business and stay clear of it, just as we have stayed clear of those evil rocks. He pointed to the pile of rocks in the corral. What we have seen today is incredible, he finished. It is good that we have Ultima to explain it, I told him. He only shrugged. We waited. A strange singing and low chanting song emanated from the house all day long. Finally, at dusk, when the night jars and bats began to fly and the setting sun had passed from orange to gray, Ultima came through the front door of the house. She carried what appeared to be 3 bundles as she stepped to the platform quickly. You have done well, she said, and placed the 3 bundles at the foot of the platform. Place the bundles on the platform and set fire to it, she commanded, and stepped back. My father was surprised when he picked up the first bundle and found it heavy. Ultima carried the 3 lightly, but he had to strain to lift them up on the platform. There was another strange thing about Ultima as she stood with her arms crossed, quietly watching my father work. The way she stood, the bright sash around her waist, and the 2 glossy braids falling over her shoulders made me feel that she had performed this ceremony in some distant past. My father picked up a dry brush, a yerba de víbora, and striking a match to it, he used it as a torch to set fire to the platform. The fire sputtered at first, but it found the drier branches that hissed and cackled, then whooshed up in a ball of yellow fire. The fragrance of the dry bush had been sharp and tangy, but as the green branches caught fire, the sweet, spermy smell of the evergreen filled the air. Continue feeding the fire until I return, Ultima commanded. She turned and walked back to the house. We piled branches beneath the platform and kept it burning. Soon even the cedar posts were burning. Their popping sound and their sweet scent filled the night air. Somehow the fire seemed to dispel the brooding mystery we had felt since the shower of the rocks. What is it we burn? Asked my father as we watched the inferno envelop the bundles. I don't know, my father answered. It is all so strange. My father once told me a story about the early Comancheros on this llano and what they learned from the Indians about their burial ceremony. They did not bury their dead the way we do, but they made a platform like this one and cremated the body as part of their way of life. He paused and I asked, are these the... Before I could finish, he said, I don't know, but if we help the Les be rid of these ungodly things, who are we to question always? In the dark night, we heard an owl sing. It was Ultima's owl. It seemed the first sign of life we had heard around the ranch all day, and it lifted our spirits. Somehow the memory of the falling rocks faded with the owl's cry. And what had been frightening and unexplainable grew distant. I looked for the rock pile in the corral, but I could not see it. Perhaps it was because the bright fire made the shadows around us very dark. Without them, my father shouted. I turned and jumped back at the top of the platform, topping the ashes beneath. The flower sparks blossom in the night air. The 4 posts which held the platform continued to burn like torches, one for each of the directions of the wind. We threw the rest of the juniper branches in the fire. Already the platform and the 3 bundles were only white ashes. You two are good workers, Ultima said. We had not heard her and were startled at her approach. I went to her and took her hand. She smelled sweet with incense. It is done, she said. Good, my father answered and wiped his hands. You know, Gabriel, she said to my father, I'm getting old. Perhaps this would be the best burial you could provide me. She peered into the dying fire and smiled. I could see that she was very tired. It's a good way to return to the earth, my father agreed. I think the confines of a damp casket will bother me too. That's the way the spirit soars immediately into the wind of the Yano, and the ashes blend quickly into the earth. Deleuze came and stood by us. He too peered into the embers of the strange fire. She says the curse is death, he said dumbly. He too looked very tired. Then it is, my father answered. How can I pay you, Deleuze? Asked Ultima. Instead of my silver, she said, you can bring us a nice lamb the next time you come to Guadalupe. I will bring a dozen, he smiled weakly. And stay away from the one-eyed Tenorio, she finished. Aye, that devil was in this too, my father exclaimed. I was out at Puerto about a month ago, Deleuze says. I went to the saloon for a drink to play some cards, I tell you. Gabriel, that man has nothing but revenge in his heart for La Grande. He said something insulting, and I answered him. I thought nothing of it. I was only upholding my honor, our honor, the pride of those from La Pasturas. But a week later, the bad things started here. I picked a bad one to tangle with. My father shook his head thoughtfully as he stared into the dying fire. The Nonia has already murdered one of our friends. I know now of his true evil, Deleuze muttered. Well, what's done is done, my father nodded. Now we must be on our way. I can never thank you enough, old friend, Deleuze said, and embraced my father warmly, then embraced and kissed Ultima. Adios, adios. We climbed into the truck and drove away, leaving Deleuze standing by the dying embers of the fire. The bouncing lights of the truck cut a jerky path through the night as we traveled out of the dark Llano back to Guadalupe. My father rolled a bowl Durham cigarette and smoked. The fatigue of the day and the humming sound of the tires on the highway made me sleep. I do not remember my father carrying me even when we arrived home. In my dreams that night, I did not recall the strange events that happened on the Agua Negra. Instead, I saw my three brothers. Their three dark figures driven to wander by the wild sea blood in their veins. Shrouded in a sea mist, they walked the streets of a foreign city. Tony, they called in the night fantasy. Tony, Riolu, are you? Here I answered, here by the river. The brown swirling waters lapped at my feet, and a monotonous chirping of the grillos as they sang in the trees mixed into a music which I found in the roots of my soul. Oh, Tony, they cried with such a mournful sound that I felt a chill in my heart. Help us, Tony, grant us a rest from this sea blood. I have no magic power to help you, I cried. I cried back. I carefully marked where the churning waters eddied into a pool. There the catfish would lurk, greedy for meat. From my disemboweled brothers, I took 3 warm livers and baited my hook. But you have the power of the church, you are the boy priest, they cried. Or choose from the power of the golden carp with the magic of your Ultima. Grant us rest. They cried in such pain for release that I took their livers from the hook and cast them into the raging muddy waters of the river of the carp. And they rested, and I rested. Sounds like he's like a younger brother of some sort. This book has put me through a lot of emotions. I have faith in it. There's something good on this earth that can overcome the bad. You know what I'm saying? In America, we learn about Jesus and the story of him being a good person, ultimately getting killed. But like when he writes about his brothers being a young kid in a dream, like is he writing a story about the youngest man of a family? Can he relate to this role? You know? Like how real is this story? Where did he get this story from? You know, it's just totally, he just made it up. What was this inspired by? Is this close to anything that's ever really been lived before? Like when they mentioned, about the devil a lot, and then about good and evil. We can't fear it, but the book is pretty good book, man. It's a good conversation book. So, that was 20 was a long chapter.